Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. It's a big week. This is the one-year anniversary of Robert Mueller's appointment as special counsel to investigate Russian interference into the 2016 election. Seems like a good time to assess how's it going. Well, the investigation is costing millions of dollars. It's producing thousands and thousands of hours of cable news commentary. Our political system has been brought to a virtual standstill. We still await the investigation, its conclusions. 1 year in, though, what do we know so far? Well, certainly nothing we were promised at the outset of the investigation. There's still no evidence of any plot by the Trump campaign to collude with the Russian government to hack the presidency, to beat Hillary Clinton. There's no evidence that Russia hacked any vote totals, for that matter. There still isn't any proof they were behind the hacking of John Podesta's emails. We still even haven't seen evidence that they had anything to do with the DNC hacking. People have been charged with crimes, but only for behavior totally unconnected to Trump's campaign or because they allegedly lied to Mueller's investigative team. In the case of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, he apparently was charged with a felony perjury crime, even though his FBI interviewers, we just learned, didn't believe he was lying when they spoke to him. So a few people are having their lives destroyed, but for nothing that we can see. No collusion has been found or even suggested. Doesn't mean we haven't learned anything, though. We have. We've learned that when Russia did try to influence the 2016 campaign, they weren't very good at it. They spent a small amount of money on online ads that almost nobody saw. Most of them were in states that had nothing to do with the outcome of the race. They weren't competitive. The ads weren't even all on Trump's behalf. Some were against Trump. Instead of backing a specific candidate, their greatest interest seems to have been sowing chaos and disunity in the American political system. And on that front, of course, mission accomplished. More than anything, though, we've learned just how clueless the people who run Washington, D.C. are. Rather than accept the fact that they created Donald Trump themselves by abandoning and then coming to despise the rest of the country they run, they couldn't face that, so they concocted the Russia collusion story as a way to sustain a world where they did nothing wrong, and they only lost because their enemies betrayed this country to a foreign power. For more than a year, Russia was all they could talk about because they certainly didn't want to talk about the issues that got Trump elected in the first place. Drug ODs, a vanishing middle class, their agenda of literally replacing the people who live in this country with immigrants. They didn't want to talk about that. But it hasn't been working. For most of Trump's presidency, Democrats have looked forward to the big midterm wins that will give the control of Congress once again. That's the whole point of all of this. But it hasn't worked. Their lead is dwindling. It's now within the margin of error. They may not win back the House at all. And it looks like the Senate is going to be beyond their reach. Why? Because the public has recognized that the Russia investigation is not what they said it was. It is, and it has been from the beginning, a witch hunt created by a cabal frantic to keep its hold on power. Tom Fitton has been tracking the Mueller investigation from the very first day. He's also the president of Judicial Watch, and he joins us now. Tom, is that an unfair summary of what we've learned? Have I missed something? Have we gotten any indication of actual collusion a year into this?
No, we haven't. You've been much too charitable, Tucker. If honestly evaluated, the Mueller investigation has been an unmitigated disaster. If the media were covering the Mueller investigation the way it was covering the Trump presidency, I think we'd all agree it hasn't worked. It's failing. It was created based on an illegal leak by James Comey. Many of the people who inspired the Mueller investigation were fired from the government. Sally Yates, the acting attorney general, Andrew McCabe, the deputy AG, James Comey, the FBI director, Andrew McCabe, the deputy FBI director, all three fired for misconduct. They helped get the Mueller investigation rolling. You have the Clinton DNC dossier that was hidden from the American people being used evidently by Mueller. We have the Flynn investigation under attack because of the corrupt way in which it was initiated and investigated by the FBI, where they said he lied when evidently he didn't. And on top of that, we've got a federal judge questioning the ultimate authority of Mr. Mueller. And we still don't know what his authority is a year out, because he's evidently had secret conversations with the Justice Department about what his authority is. And on top of it, the Russia investigation, the key aspect of it, the Russia troll indictment, it's now being turned into an opportunity for the Russia intelligence operations to go into a federal court and demand evidence from Mr. Mueller about what they have on Russia intelligence operations, namely intervention in our elections. What a disaster for the rule of law And frankly, the president has been victimized through all of this because evidently there's nothing to justify an investigation of him requiring Justice Department resources and authorities the way that's been misused to date.
But I thought, and quickly, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the whole point of an independent counsel is to assure the rest of us that the investigation is on the level, that it's not tainted by potential conflicts. Given that, why didn't Mueller try harder to at least seem bipartisan? Maybe hiring one registered Republican as an investigator. He didn't bother to do that.
Well, it's the arrogance of the deep state. They think they can do no wrong, and Mueller and Comey are part of the same team on that regard. On top of that, you have him hiring Democrats with abandon, and then you have the page-struck text messages. You know, he kept those two FBI agents off of his investigation because of bias and hid that from the American people for 4 months. You know, Mr. Comey, if he were a typical government official, would have been asked to resign a long time ago.
Well, that's a really good point. Tom Fitton has been following this from day one. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
It's pretty obvious that the Democratic Party's relentless focus on Russia to the exclusion of all else, like issues that matter to people, may have been a mistake politically. An article this morning in the Daily Beast makes a ludicrous claim. It says that Democrats actually wanted to spend the last year and a half talking about real issues, health care and the economy, but they couldn't somehow because cable news stopped them. Rachel Maddow told them not to, apparently. Cable instead forced them to talk about Russia. They didn't want to. Luckily, we kept copies of the tape, and here's what they actually said about Russia.
There is no question that Russia attacked us.
Were attacks, ladies and gentlemen, on our Constitution.
Attack on the integrity of our elections.
An attack on our democracy.
We are only at the beginning of understanding what the Russians did to affect our elections.
I think there's a broad recognition among our members that Russia is not our friend.
Why does it not worry Donald Trump that the Russians, according to the intelligence community, tried to and indeed did kind of infiltrate and undermine our democracy by what they did?
Richard Goodstein is a lawyer. He advised both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns, and he joins us tonight for what's going to be a tough conversation for him, I would say, Richard, because
I don't think so.
It's not really plausible to make the case that, look, you can argue that Russia hacked our elections, as Democrats have argued for the last year. They're our main enemy in the world, as they've also argued. And, you know, maybe time will prove you right. I doubt it, but maybe. You can't argue, if you're a Democrat, that what you really wanted to talk about was the issues. You didn't really want to talk about Russia. You just happened to talk about it nonstop for a year. Nobody's going to believe that because it's a lie.
Well, again, it's the intelligence community, Tucker, not Democrats, not Republicans. The intelligence community is the group that said that the Russians try to undermine our democracy. So don't lay that off on me or any Democrat.
Hold on. There's no intelligence community. There are a number of federal agencies, some exclusively devoted to intel gathering, others partly, like the Coast Guard. There's no intelligence community. There's no consensus on anything.
There's a director of national intelligence.
More than 3 pieces. Yeah,
there's a director of national intelligence. There's a head of CIA. Every single person who's charged with overseeing intelligence for this country, when asked, and when their agency was asked, said that the Russians tried to interfere. Look, the fact of the matter is, the Russians approached the Trump campaign and said, we have stolen materials. Would you like them from the Hillary Clinton campaign?
Right.
Donald Trump Jr. said, love it. Putting aside what ultimately happened later.
I would say we've plowed this ground before. What I'm asking you is a political question. Clearly, this is not bearing fruit for the Democratic Party. Their lead is within the margin of error. This is a political matter. It's just not working. Okay, they're not going to retake Congress on the strength of the Russia story. Now they're telling us we never wanted to talk about Russia in the first place. And all I'm saying is that's a lie.
Yeah.
And don't lie to me when I've been watching TV for the past year and all you've talked about is Russia. Did Rachel Maddow make you do that? I mean, like... Don't lie to me.
Look, the fact is, I think there's 2 tracks. I think the fact is the Democratic Party knows it's not going to win this election. They're not going to win the 2018 elections just talking about Mueller or Trump even. They've got to have an affirmative agenda about economic justice and social justice, okay? But the fact of the matter is Donald Trump, we used to say he was at historically low approval ratings. I checked today. Jimmy Carter actually edged him out. So he's now second most unpopular president this far into an administration.
Right. You're absolutely right. So why aren't the Democrats going to take Congress and put Pelosi back in the speaker's seat?
Every election, we just had that special election in Arizona. Trump won by 21. The Republican won by 5. Every single Republican who won the House last year by 16 points or under has to be looking over their shoulder and scared to death because this momentum is unabated.
No, but okay. Look, Democrats have a lot of energy. It's a midterm in the president's first term. Of course, they're going to gain seats. There have only been, I think, 2 elections in American history that didn't happen. So it's going to happen. But Democrats don't look like they are a lock to win back the House, given the president's relatively low popularity. And you're absolutely right. Half the country doesn't like him. Democrats should be way far ahead of where they are today. And the reason they're not farther ahead is because they're not running on anything. And to the extent they are, they're running on things like more abortion and more illegal aliens and things that are insane and scare people. And you know that.
Well, again, we'll see when 2018 midterms roll around. All we know is from every other single special election, the Democratic wave seems to be on the order of 10, 15%. And you can say what you want at this point. That will take out a lot of incumbent Republicans. Will it continue? That remains to be seen.
But that was going to happen no matter what. No, but hold on. Will you just, for the sake of honesty, will you concede that Democrats didn't spend the last year telling us that Russia hacked our election, whatever that means? It was a lie. But they didn't say that because Rachel Maddow made them or Morning Joe sent them a memo and they had to obey. They said it because they thought it would work, and it didn't.
They were horrified. They were horrified that the Republicans, that the Russians did this, and B, that the White House was indifferent or worse, was complicit. That's the thing that Democrats have been talking about.
They don't care about this country. If they cared about the country, they'd secure the borders and fight back against China. I mean, the countries that are actually controlling our policies get no pushback from the Democrats at all because they don't care.
We had a net outflow, frankly, from the U.S. to Mexico. In the last 4 or 5 years of the Obama administration, we had a net outflow. That's how much they care about the border. The people were leaving, not coming in.
Yeah. Richard Goodstein, thank you.
Sure.
Good to see you. A year and a half ago, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff came on this show and seemed very confident that proof of Russian collusion would soon be forthcoming any day. Here's what he said. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email.
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
Okay, you're not, you know what, you're dodging.
And you're carrying water for the Kremlin.
I'm not carrying water for the Kremlin. You're a sitting member of Congress on the Intel Committee, and you can't say they hacked.
You're gonna have to move your shoulder to RT Russian television because
you know what?
This is perfect.
Just so
this is perfectly
beneath your office. Well, it didn't quite turn out that way somehow. Author and columnist Mark Stein joins us tonight. He's been watching too. He's here to celebrate the year anniversary of the Mueller investigation. Mark, a year in, do you think that history has proved Congressman Schiff right?
Well, I must say, I really enjoy your show on Russia Today television. What is it, Tucker's Kremlin tonight? I love it. The babushka who reads out the bingo numbers is absolutely terrific. The fact is, there are no Russians in the Russian investigation. They've indicted a bunch of Russian trolls who are never going to be standing in any American courtroom. That's absolutely preposterous. They might as well indict Macedonian content farmers. It would all be an absurd joke if they weren't actually destroying American lives, like those of Michael Flynn and Carter Page. Whatever you feel about them, they don't deserve to be trashed because they're the designated fall guys for a totally corrupted investigation. I'll say this, Tucker. I take it as read that foreign governments prosecute their own interests in other countries' elections. Russia does that. France does that. The United States certainly does that, and often in its allies too, as when Obama interfered in the Israeli election and in the Brexit vote in the United Kingdom. I take that as read. It's far more disturbing to me when the elements of the domestic government interfere in their own country's election, which is all we really know now after a year of watching Mueller's absurd investigation play out. That significant elements of the US government were interfering in the US election. That's actually far more serious. And as for Richard's point about the intelligence community, I think that's actually part of the problem. The last time I checked, more than 4 million people had top security clearances. That's actually 4 times the population of my state, the one I'm in at the moment, New Hampshire. It's about the population of New Zealand. There shouldn't be an intelligence community, so-called, and if there is, they should all go off to some farmland in Pennsylvania like the Amish and raise barns. They're just mischief-making here.
It's hardly a community. They don't agree with each other on anything. But quickly, is it plausible when you hear Democrats a year in say, you know, we never really wanted to talk about this. We wanted to talk about getting rid of the carried interest exemption or whatever. Is that believable?
No, they finally figured out what most of us figured out 11 and a half months ago, that nobody's interested. Everybody understands, you know,
right,
John Podesta's password was password. You don't have to be a Russian or a Macedonian. The average 7-year-old boy could hack into John Podesta's account. That's how easy that is. This thing is ridiculous, except for the real American lives it's destroying.
I think one of my kids may have done that, actually. I'm going to check after the